Human trafficking is all around us, but unseen by most of us. In the words of survivor Chandra Wuburontu, human trafficking is hidden, but is everywhere. It is not just happening in some faraway place. It is happening right here, in our communities, and it thrives when people choose not to see.
That's such a powerful reminder, Syra. And as dental professionals, we've often been told that we're uniquely positioned to notice potential victims because of the private nature of dental exams. But what does that really mean in practice? What physical or behavioral warning signs should we be looking for? And if we suspect trafficking, how do we respond safely and effectively?
I'm Dr. Zaira Paredes, joined by my co-host, Dr. Sonia Zaguta. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. James Frizzle, a family dentist in Niagara Falls, graduate of the Dental Forensics program at McGill, and co-founder of Dentists United Against Human Trafficking.
And he is also the author of Domestic Violence, IPV Concussions, Human Trafficking, A Canadian Perspective. James, thank you for joining us for this important conversation, Human Trafficking, Recognizing and Reacting, the Role of the Dental Professionals.
Welcome to the Pillar Spot, James.
Thank you for allowing me to discuss some of these hard truths on this very difficult subject.
James, welcome to the Pillars Pod. Human trafficking. This is such a critical and timely subject, but sadly one that doesn't get the attention it deserves in dentistry. What inspired you to focus your research and practice on human trafficking? Was there a moment in your own work when trauma-informed care really shifted your focus and your approach?
Well, there's two or three things that influenced me to get involved in this topic. McGill University, my professor was Dr. Robert Dorian, and after graduating, he told me and my fellow classmates, use what we've taught you and go out and do something. And the other thing I found is the more that I researched that topic, the more that I wanted to dig deeper. It was almost like researching human trafficking for me became an addiction. So I also had read a journal article that influenced me tremendously. It was written by a forensics nurse who specializes in human trafficking. Her name is Dr. Francine. She's got a hyphenated last name, Dr. Francine Bono Neary. And so I also, when I wrote that book, I actually dedicated a chapter to trauma-informed care. That means that we appreciate the victim. We choose what words we'd use to communicate with that victim. We empower that victim with choices and help them and guide them to different resources that they can obtain.
And speaking of your advocacy, you co-founded Dentists United Against Human Trafficking. Why did you feel this organization was needed, and what is its mission? How can dentists who are listening today get involved and support this work?
Well, the website is in its infancy. And so there is an icon on the website where dentists can go on there and become a member, no charge, there's no fee involved. And once they become a member and I accumulate some members, we're going to send out a monthly newsletter to dentists or hygienists or anybody from the dental, even front desk staff, and anybody that's interested in this subject matter. And I was also influenced again by Dr. Bono Neary. She founded a website called Nurses United Against Human Trafficking.org. And so she mentored me and actually edited the book that I wrote. She helped me edit it and contributed. She also contributed to that book. And I was encouraged by her to start Dentists United Against Human Trafficking.ca.
What a laudable mission. To help us understand the scope, could you paint a picture of what human trafficking looks like today, not just globally, but right here in our own communities?
Well, human trafficking, I believe, affects every community in Canada and in the United States. And I actually believe that they should be putting up billboards warning people of the danger of trafficking and putting up the 1-800 number that they have for the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline. And as we know, traffickers are master manipulators. Some statistics, the average age is age 10 years old when a child first gets their own cell phone given to them by their parents. And we also find another statistic that online human trafficking predators are online. And once a child gets a device, it takes only 18 minutes for them to meet a new online friend. And in the United States, they have this thing called the USA Cyber Tip Hotline, and they receive 32 million calls per year, and many of these calls involving missing children related to online predators. And we can remember that there used to be red light districts, and then now there's no more red light districts. There's online apps where men can go to an online app and meet women or girls and meet up with them at a motel or hotel and pay money for sex. So this is a new world that we're living in through the internet.
Wow, that's truly eye-opening. But as dentists living and working in either a small community within Ontario or a large city such as Toronto, many of us would say that we have never seen an instance of human trafficking in our locales or in our practices. In your opinion, how likely is this to be the case, or is it right there in front of us, and are we just not seeing it, or seeing it and not recognizing it?
That's an excellent question. Some of these small communities, sometimes it's not human trafficking occurring in every small community, but there's kidnapping going on. So that if you're in a shopping parking lot or a grocery store parking lot, and you need to be aware of your surroundings at all time, even in small communities, that you might be kidnapped. So you don't want to be staring down like a cell phone zombie, but you want to be looking around, aware of your surroundings at all time, that you're not kidnapped and taken to across Canada in the corridors that we have in Canada, the 401, the Trans-Canada Highway, the East-West corridors, and introduced into sex trafficking. For example, one of my hygienists was almost kidnapped at a shopping mall. It's called the Penn Center. And I've also have a dental patient that was also almost kidnapped in a parking lot of a shopping mall. So again, as healthcare professionals, we need to get training to be aware of the human trafficking situation and what in forensics, what we call the power of observation. And we can learn this through training. And we already have in the dental profession, we're very observant people, but to actually be specialized in the power of observation in the human trafficking situations.
James, let's talk about misconceptions. What are some of the most common myths about trafficking that you think dental professionals and everyone need to unlearn?
There was a movie that came out in 2023. The title of that movie was The Sound of Freedom. It portrayed human trafficking occurring in a foreign country. And the myth is that it does happen in foreign countries, but the myth is that it also happens in Canada and it happens in the United States. And it actually is a form of slavery. Unfortunately, in Canada, the RCMP is underfunded and undermanned to combat the trafficking that's occurring in Canada.
And when it comes to victims, is it only young women who are trafficked? What about men or older adults? How do people typically find themselves in these situations? And are they often looking for rescue opportunities but too afraid to ask?
It can happen to men and it can happen to older adults also. And some of them, they're afraid to ask because their traffickers threatening harm to them or harm to their family. And then a certain segment of the victims also are totally unaware that they actually are being trafficked. Again, looking at some statistics, the average age of human trafficking victims is between age 13 to 16. And anybody that's been to hygienist school or dental university, we know that there's a bell curve. We've heard that phrase where they bell curve our marks. At the top of the bell curve is age 13 to 16. So as you know, that means that there's other age groups above and below that bell curve. So there's even some people kidnapped as human trafficking victims as young as age 5 or 6. And on the other side of the bell curve, there's older adults being kidnapped and trafficked. And again, you've got some women who are age 40. They look like a youthful appearance. They look like they're age 20. And then some people are victimized into trafficking as runaways from home. And the sad part is sometimes they run away from the home and they say, oh, my parents were too strict and I'm running away, even though they were loving parents. And then in other situations, the children are running away from home because they're actually in an abusive family situation. They're running away from that abusive family situation. And then they run into a trafficker who says, I'm going to give you love and I'm going to buy you things and I'm going to, and they, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for love. They're looking for affection. And then you've got homeless people that are victims. And again, some that are kidnapped. And then once somebody becomes a sex trafficking victim, they're often drugged with narcotics or hard drugs because a normal person that's kidnapped is not going to go doing sex acts that are hardcore in sex trafficking. So that way, for them to cope with that, the trafficker drugs them with usually the drug of choice, narcotics, and then they're seeing multiple men per day, and sometimes they're often violently raped before being put into prostitution. And many, unfortunately, of these victims become drug addicts. Some of them are, like to say, repeat myself, they're looking for rescue opportunities, but again, most don't realize that they're being trafficking. So quite often in our dental office, it's more important to let the victim know that they're in a safe place. And if they want to come back to our office in the future, they're welcome here. It's a safe place to come to. So the first time we meet one of these victims, it's not always a rescue situation. And again, even just a kind word, compassionate word from the dentist or the hygienist, or even the front desk staff.
I agree. It's up to the whole dental team to observe and react. We've often heard said that dentists are in a unique position to spot red flags. But what are the red flags, physical or behavioral indicators that dentists, hygienists, and staff should look for during dental appointments?
The biggest red flag is that the victim is accompanied by a domineering older man or woman that accompanies them to the appointment, and they're domineering and interfering and want to be involved in every step of the dental appointment. Now, sometimes they appear malnourished. They might have head lice. They might have intravenous IV drug marks on their arms. They might have signs of abuse, bruising, bite marks. The thing is, if they have bruising and bite marks, sometimes it's difficult for us as healthcare professionals to discern whether this is a human trafficking victim situation or is it a domestic violence situation. So sometimes when it's under the category signs of abuse, it's difficult to distinguish. And then there's branding. And sometimes it's a tattoo, a branding tattoo with the trafficker's name, or sometimes it's a necklace with a gang symbol. There's a little booklet that I have put out that I purchased, and it's a little booklet and it shows all the different possible samples of tattoos. And what I did is I visited every tattoo place in Niagara Falls and every tattoo place in Hamilton, Ontario. And I talked to the person at the tattoo place to give them a free copy of this book and to educate them that to look out for certain tattoos like that it could be a branding tattoo from a human trafficking victim. And again, some of these victims have a fear or mistrust of law enforcement. And so they're more likely to trust a dental healthcare professional, or they're more likely to trust a social worker. Because the police are going to say, oh, you're a drug addict and you're selling drugs. That sometimes the traffickers have them selling drugs. So the fear is that the police are going to not recognize them as a victim, but the police are going to arrest them for being a drug dealer. And unfortunately, some of the police chiefs and police departments are actually being paid and bribed by the organized crime. The human trafficking victims know that, and so they're fearful of being able to trust law enforcement. And again, some of these people with the drug addiction and cannabis addiction, they have memory loss and they have PTSD. And some of them even develop psychosis. And some of them, if you question them, they don't even know what city they're in because they're transient through the trafficker going from city to city to city. Some of them, you'll ask them and they'll tell you they sleep where they work and they have no private space. And sometimes it's not always head lice and malnourishment. Sometimes they appear well-groomed, dressed with their nails and hair done very well. And again, some of them may not seek help as they feel threatened that their trafficker is going to harm them or harm their family. And again, some of these victims, and this sounds dark, forgive me, but some of them have been psychologically brainwashed based on fear or misplaced feelings of love. And it's something similar, the technique that these master manipulator traffickers use, something similar to the MK Ultra brainwashing techniques. And one final point is their behavioral signs. Again, they exhibit behavior of fear, anxiety, depression, paranoia, and sometimes psychosis and secrecy.
Now, sometimes dental professionals hesitate to take action because they are unsure. They see signs but worry that they might be mistaken. So, James, how can we differentiate trafficking from other forms of abuse or neglect, especially with new patients? And what kinds of questions or observations can help us make that distinction?
Again, excellent question. There's a specific word, an adjective. If we were going to call the police, we use the word suspected. So if we recognize some of the signs that indicate trafficking, but we're fearful that we might be mistaken, we use the word suspected. So if we call the police, we say there's a suspected human trafficking victim, and you call the police, and it's important, if possible, like in my office, we have surveillance cameras in the parking lot. The original reason I put surveillance in the cameras in the parking lot was to, if somebody tripped and fell, it would be on video to show. But now we use it for security. We can watch the staff get to their vehicles safely on their way home, and we can see what's going on in the parking lot. And so either through looking out through a window or looking at our surveillance cameras and using the zoom feature to get the perpetrator's make of the car, color of the car, the license plate number, and with the province of that license plate. And so we could call the police and tell them we have suspicion, a suspected human trafficking victim. And another question, how does one differentiate trafficking from other signs of abuse or self-neglect, especially if the patient is previously unknown to you? And again, just like any other dental patient, we show compassion. I listen to patients better than I listen to my wife. Sometimes a patient will open up and tell you things and confess things that they won't tell anybody else. And sometimes I feel like they're telling me so much and so much. And I'm just a dentist. I'm not a Catholic priest. You don't have to confess. But in this case, it's important that they open up to us. And I might leave the room to do a hygienist check, and they'll trust the dental assistant and they'll tell the dental assistant what's happening. They might not trust the dentist, but they'll open up to the dental assistant, or they'll open up to the hygienist. And again, how we know is by knowing these red flags that we had just discussed, to know the red flags and to know if it applies to this patient. And sometimes we just need to ask them if they need help. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable talking, but if we get them down the hallway and take them into the Panorex machine to do a panoramic x-ray, or pretend that we're taking a panoramic x-ray to separate them from the domineering escort that brought them to the appointment. Sometimes we can actually have a more private conversation and they can say, I need help, please help me. And so we can have a more private conversation by separating them using the reason to take an x-ray.
For dental students or recent graduates who may feel overwhelmed by this topic, what is one practical step that they can take today to start building awareness and confidence?
I think we're all in agreement that the dental universities and the colleges, they need to put this in their curriculum, even a 2 or 3 hour presentation. I always send a cover letter explaining that I'm donating this book and that all the profits of this book are being donated to a women's shelter in St. Catharines called Jillian's Place. And so I've sent a book to Niagara College Hygienist School. I sent a book to the RCDS and telling them these are all the different topics that we could discuss. And 3 years ago, I contacted the dean of the faculty of University of Toronto Dental School, the faculty of dentistry. And at that time, they were polite, but they said that I was not qualified. You don't have a book published. You don't have any journal articles published. You're not qualified to do presentations at the dental school. So now I have a book published. I'm also having a journal article published in January 2026. And once that happens, I will diplomatically approach the dental school again, offering them to introduce this into their curriculum.
James, I wonder if we can turn to documentation as another area of concern. If we suspect trafficking, how should we record injuries or behaviors in a way that's useful and appropriate?
Written documentation, and if possible, if they gave us consent only, photographic documentation. The patterned injuries, it could be a pattern caused by a bite mark. It could be a pattern caused by somebody being whipped with a belt or whipped with a coat hanger. It's our job to use the term patterned injury. It's not our task to decide what caused the pattern injury. The forensics people will come in from the police and they'll maybe get a search warrant and search the house to see what caused this pattern injury. And even if it looks like a bite mark, we don't say bite mark, we say patterned injury. So we do a written documentation describing these pattern injuries, the approximate size, the color, the shape. And again, if we do get consent to do photographic documentation, and if we use our personal cell phone to do those photographs, that becomes inadmissible in court because the photographs are mixed in with our own personal photographs. And so that breaches the chain of evidence and they won't allow that in court. And also, because this documentation becomes key, because in the future, we might be called upon as healthcare professionals to be an expert witness in court.
And of course, there is also the issue of confidentiality. How do we balance respecting patient privacy with the responsibility to act? Are dentists in Ontario or elsewhere in Canada legally obligated to report suspected trafficking?
So, regarding the patient confidentiality, if the patient is 18 years or under, even in Canada, we should take action and report it. If they're older than 18, whether it's human trafficking or domestic violence, we're not allowed to report it without the consent of the patient. Unfortunately, in Ontario and in all of Canada, for human trafficking, there is no mandatory reporting. What they advise us to do in Canada is to either call 911 or call the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline. That phone number is 1-833-900-1010. And again, you could still call 911 and use the word suspected. There's suspected human trafficking victim. Things are better on the American side in the United States. In 10 of the states, there is mandatory reporting that exists for human trafficking victims. But again, in the United States, it basically applies to age 18 and under.
In discussing the topic of underreporting, fear associated with reporting can be a concern. Many professionals may worry about safety or retaliation. How can we overcome these barriers? And could you share an example where a dental professional's action truly made a difference?
Well, the fear of reporting is real, as some of these perpetrators, even if they're not, but some of them are connected to transnational organized crime. So there is a risk involved for health professionals to get involved. Now, on a recent RCDSO seminar, one of the guest speakers for that seminar stated that even though it was a human domestic violence topic, she referenced how she separated a victim of human trafficking from the domineering patient escort by taking a Panerex film, and the patient fell to the ground and begged for help. So the police were called and a good ending resulted, but the perpetrator threatened the female dentist with revenge. For me, the word fear and the word faith are opposites. So you either have faith or you have fear. So this is personal, but faith in God overcomes fear of what any man can do to us. So it's a personal decision, but we either have to have faith or fear, and have faith and do the right thing and help that victim. And if they're asking for help, we need to take that step and not have fear of what the perpetrator might do to us.
Looking at practical takeaways, James, what kinds of protocols or referral lists should dental practices have in place to be prepared? And what about safety measures for the team?
Well, I'm going to address the safety measures first. And again, every dental office is different. I have 4 operatories, and at the end of the hallway, there's a door that goes to the supply room and the staff locker room and the private staff washroom. That door has a lock on it so that if I wanted to, I could lock them in there. And when I mean them, it could be a hygienist or a dental assistant with the victim locked in there. And that would be a safe place. And then I also have a door from the entrance from the waiting room into the operatories. The original reason I put the locked door there was not for security, but now it is for security. But originally I put it there to keep salespeople out from coming in and harassing me. So now it's there as a security measure. And then I also have a utility room that has a lock on that door. So that could be a safe room also. So the possible scenario is that we could take the victim, lock them with a staff member in the change room, supply room, or lock them in the utility room, and then just call the police. And then if the perpetrator starts to harass us, we could say that the victim ran out the back door, they're gone. And some of the other protocols, we'd have to develop this plan with the staff so they're aware of what the safe rooms are and what to do when a suspicion of a human trafficking victim arises. And again, the staff would have to be trained on the screening tools, which is the list of red flags that we just previously discussed. And so again, create a safe spot. I've shared what I do in my office. Your office might be different, but there's got to be somewhere where there's a locked room where people can be locked into a safe room. And we also need to address the medical, physical, and emotional needs of the victim. And then later on, we need to empower the victim and let them make decisions and give them options. And then we need to report those suspected cases to 911. And then later on, to help that victim connect with resources for help. For example, women's shelters where she can be protected and stay safe.
For those who want to learn more, what training programs or organizations would you recommend to dental professionals who want to improve their ability to recognize and respond to trafficking?
Well, there's one organization, the website's called healtrafficking.org, and they offer a 2-day course where it's called Human Trafficking Train the Trainer Academy. So it's kind of like you have somebody get trained and then they can train other people. And then once those other people are trained, they can take this course again. It's almost to people keep getting trained and then they train other people. It's kind of like discipling other people. And this healtrafficking.org, it's a Zoom. It lasts for 2 days, all day Saturday, all day Sunday on a Zoom presentation. It's put on by two organizations. It's put on by Boston Children's Hospital Continuing Education. And it's actually also put on, sponsored by Harvard Medical School Teaching Hospital. And so I personally took that course, so I can vouch for it that it's a good course, it's good training. And again, that website for that training is healtrafficking.org. This other organization is called polarisproject.org. It's an American website for reference material related to human trafficking. All kinds of excellent material reference source, academic reference source. And then the other website is a Canadian website put on by the British Columbia government. And if you Google it, it's called Online Training Initiative to Address Human Trafficking. And again, Canadian content, excellent material. Actually also offer Zoom presentations, but in this case, you can just register for an online course and take it at your leisure.
Thank you for sharing that, James. I wonder if we can turn to the bigger picture of prevention and advocacy. Beyond recognizing victims, is there a role for dental professionals, our dental schools, and our licensing bodies in prevention and advocacy? Are you aware of any efforts in this direction?
At the moment, I'm going to do follow-up to answer that question. I'm going to do follow-up with the dental school, Faculty of Dentistry at University of Toronto. I'm going to do follow-up with them and diplomatically plead with them to consider training for human trafficking. And the licensing body, RCDSO, it looks promising because they've already done a presentation on domestic violence, and it's extremely possible that they'll in the future do a presentation on human trafficking victims in the dental office and how we recognize them.
James, we have covered so many points. Finally, if you could leave dental professionals with just one key message about the role in fighting human trafficking, what would it be?
Just again to re-emphasize that the human trafficking victims, they are actually accessing dental care. And now that we've taken this podcast, it's made us aware to become more observant and have the power of observation. And also with future training through organizations like healtrafficking.org, we'd be able to become even more better, well equipped. And the thing is, they interviewed some survivors of human trafficking, and they said that it meant all the world when they went to a dental appointment and somebody said one word of kindness and somebody said, "Is there anything we can do to help you?" So these survivors testify how important it is that dental offices stepped up and helped them. Survivors have been so thankful for what some dental offices done, even one word of kindness from the front desk, from the dental assistant, listening to them, and more important, asking them, "Do you need help?"
James, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping us navigate this difficult but vital topic. It's clear that combating trafficking requires compassion, vigilance, and collaboration, and that dentists truly are on the front lines. This conversation is a call to action. It challenges all of us to move beyond hesitation and embrace our responsibility to prepare, to educate ourselves, and to support one another in this work. Dentistry is about more than restoring smiles. It's about restoring humanity.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us. Remember, awareness is the first step, but action is what changes lives. If today's conversation moved you, share it with a colleague, start a discussion in your dental community, or explore the resources we mentioned. Together, we can make our practices places of safety, dignity, and hope. That's all for today's episode of the Pillars Pod. Thank you to our listeners for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube for more conversations that matter. Until next time, this is Sonia and Zaira signing off. Thank you.